Covercraft is what happens when you take an episode of a TV show that did so well and try to recreate it, and it just fails completely. This is the 8th episode of the 26th season of The Simpsons, directed by Stephen Dean Moore, and there are two ways of looking at this. Judging it on its own, which one might argue is the only way to judge it, but also judging it against the episode of The Simpsons that focused on the B Sharps, which is from Homer's Barbershop Quartet, which was quite a few seasons ago now. But basically, once again, Homer has joined a band, and I'll talk about how that came about, and the success they have, and the highs and lows that come with it. The narrative's not identical, there are differences, but for me, Homer's Barbershop Quartet was a perfect look at Homer having a successful music career, and some of the other characters grouping together for that. This tries to recreate that, but fails. Marge and some of the other wives are complaining about how their husbands are having these midlife crises where they just spend their time on their own, playing their music, whatever the instruments are, guitars, drums, and it drives them crazy. So they decide to encourage their husbands to group together and have jam sessions, and this forms Covercraft. And Covercraft is initially Dr. Hibbert, Lovejoy, Van Houten, and Homer. And then Apu comes along, and it turns out that Apu has an amazing voice, and Apu does very well for himself. And he's the one who's getting all of the attention, and it looks like his career is going to rocket. And Lisa tries to tell Homer that it doesn't matter because the reason he was playing guitar was for the music, not for the fame. And I think that that's obviously a really important message, that it doesn't matter what your craft is. Any kind of artist will feel jealous of people who are more successful than they are. I'm speaking as a writer. It's completely inevitable. But this episode helps to reinforce the fact that at the end of the day, when you're an artist, a writer, a musician, whatever, you do it for the love of the craft, not because of the fame. The fame is just, well, I was going to say a nice bonus if it happens, but fame is not always a nice thing. So I'm told. I have no experience. But I have to say, while I like that message, I don't care for the episode. I just didn't find it that interesting. There were some good bits, for example, in the garage when they're practicing the music. I quite like that, seeing these characters come together. The music itself is not my style of music, whereas with Homer's Barbershop Quartet, I love barbershop quartets, so that was my kind of music. The music in this isn't, but it still sounded good to my ears, at least. So I think it addressed some really important things, but it did so in a way that was really boring. Yeah, it's nice to see Apu getting some positive attention and feeling quite good about himself, because usually his life's just intense and full on, and he doesn't really have much time to himself because he's working around the clock when he's not looking after 8 children. But at the same time, it didn't work for me. I was constantly, perhaps unfairly, comparing it to Homer's Barbershop Quartet, and I just think the narratives are too similar, even though they're nothing alike. Hopefully you know what I mean here. They're both about Homer joining a music group and what happens when fame starts to affect at least some of them. The messages are not identical, but there are some similarities going on here, and I didn't think it was a good example of how to do this narrative. It's not terrible. Had I not seen the other one, then I would have thought it was okay. I mean, I still think it's okay, but I didn't find it to be very engaging, and I didn't find the music for me personally to be that interesting because it's not to my taste. So unfortunately, while it's not terrible, I have to say Covercraft was generally just really boring for me.